and welcome to CIONET Spotlight, where each week we profile a digital leader somewhere in the world. And the idea is we're going to look back a year and we're going to look forward a year. And it's quite interesting coming up on the anniversary of COVID. And this is a fast 30-minute kind of edgy dialogue. You're just going to hear myself have a conversation with Alan Eddy. A bit of intro on Alan. He has a very long technology career in financial services on both sides of the Atlantic, rattling off from the beginning: Citi, UBS, RBS, JP Morgan Chase, Nordea, where we had first met, and now AST, headquartered in New York City. And Alan, you've achieved all that in 32 years old, so well done. Particular focus on your role at AST is technology innovation, we'll get to later today. AST is this giant company that's nobody's ever heard of, American Stock Transfer and Trust. Just think of them as shares and equities get purchased daily throughout the world, and AST is the backbone behind all of that. 25% of public companies in North America use AST every day. 50% of all IPOs go through. And they're international. If you wanted to buy Vodafone ADRs in London, that goes through AST as well. So that's a really quick snapshot. We have about 30 minutes today to really run through this. Alan, delighted you can do this. Greetings from, I know, the New York metro area. I hope I touched on your profile, but maybe you just want to elaborate on that a little bit, and then we'll jump in.
Well, Mark, thanks. It's great to work with you again. You've done some work with us both at Nordea, my previous firm, and also at AST. Yeah, I'm the Chief Technology Officer for AST. I'm usually based in Wall Street, the iconic street in New York, of course. I haven't been there since last March. I think had I known that it was going to be so long out of the office, I'd have probably emptied more of my office. But yeah, we're based in the New York area in the US. As you mentioned, AST we're very large in things like IPOs. We help companies at all stages of their life cycle, whether you're a private company, whether you're thinking of going public, so we'll help you with your IPOs. If you're a public company, we'll help you with your all the equity plans, all your stocks. Probably many people on this call have AST accounts. We have millions and millions of individuals who use us to manage their equities, maybe sell the shares, we process their dividends, all those things. We're in tax year season right now, so people will get their statements and so on. And we help companies all the way through the life cycle. Some companies have gone all the way around the circle. They've gone private, they've gone public, they've gone bankrupt, they've gone private again, they've gone public again. So we're there for every company throughout their life cycle. We help the companies themselves manage their ownership. So it's very complicated these days, how many people own companies, whether it's institutions, whether it's individuals. We help people analyze all those things. So yeah, it's an interesting business. It's been very busy. And as a note, we'll talk today about our year and how we've managed through some of these issues.
Great. Let's start by looking back 12 months. And first bit of advice is you should have packed more from Wall Street as you headed back to home. But what did you have in place, and what not contingency plans, but what was already in place at AST that really helped you survive the year?
That's right. I mean, I think there were three main problems to help us understand what we had in place. The first was that many people had never worked at home. So we had hundreds of people in offices, as you would expect, closely packed offices, as you would expect. And that really wasn't tenable with COVID. So we had a situation where many people had never worked from home. They were used to coming to the office, logging into their PC or something, and had never worked from home. So that's operations people or call centers always had been working in the office. That was one example. The second one was that AST, we still deal a lot with paper. So physical mail. People like statements. They like getting their physical statements. We send out voting papers for people. We send out checks for dividends. A lot of people like checks. So a lot of people like those physical types of paper. And we still had to process those things. And the third issue is that really we have a very successful project-based business in DF King based on proxy voting. And these can scale up to hundreds of people for months at a time. And we used to bring those folks into one of our Brooklyn offices. And again, that was a problem. And these people need a lot of close supervision. So we have three problems really. So what really helped us, what we had in place? Well, like many financial firms, we're regulated. We're driven by availability and a lot of regulations about how we operate our business. So we have physical data centers separate from our offices. So a lot of our main systems, the vast bulk of our main systems are all in our data centers. We have a pair of data centers, and it's all virtualized. We have people who log in through things like Citrix into the data centers. They don't have physical PCs. So that helped a lot. So we were able to really spin that up. Of course, we had to help with this first problem about people who'd never worked from home before. We had to find laptops for them. We had to dust off old laptops that, we had to re-image and so on. We had to send people out to stores to buy laptops. I mean, people forget, but back in April time, all companies were buying every single laptop in sight. You couldn't buy a laptop on Amazon. You couldn't buy a laptop from Dell. So we had people going to stores with credit cards buying laptops. It was an interesting time. The second thing we had really, which helped a lot, was we were in our advanced stage of a digitalization project, and some of their first deliverables were behind us. This things like robotics, as well as digitizing some of this paper I was mentioning. So we were very quickly, within 5 weeks, which is staggering if you think about it, to start a project. We developed it and we implemented a workflow for our mail rooms where all incoming mail was digitized. This is like 10,000 pieces of paper we get a day, all digitized and processed through a workflow to our operations staff who are now working from home. So this was something we did in 5 weeks, which is staggering. So we were able to reduce the number of people coming to the office to the bare minimum, because we just didn't want people coming into the office if at all possible. So the number of people coming into the office dropped considerably, which was a great relief because of COVID. And the third one was really those big project-based people in one of our offices that I mentioned. They need a lot of direct supervision generally. And again, we had to spin up those projects from people working from home. And that needed a lot of nimble footwork from my team just to build out our Citrix. Again, we had a Citrix infrastructure. We built that out even more. Again, we benefit from that modern data center architecture. We equipped them, we trained them, we had them all debugging their home computers, and lastly, supervising them remotely. So again, a great cross-functional collaboration there from HR, from IT, the businesses, operations, getting those folks working from home. So I think those are the things, Mark, that helped us. Our data centers, our ability to spin things up, some of the digitization projects which were in the works already, which really helped us.
Good. From a business perspective, you report to the CEO, Marty Flanagan. We've had conversations with Marty. Put your leadership team around the table, and what are the lessons learned from a technology perspective? And what's the business saying about the state of technology inside of AST, and the lessons learned, the takeaways from that?
Well, I think as a regulated company, of course, we have a lot of contingency planning goes on. BCP and DR testing we do every year, often more than once. We have lots of contingency plans, and that including one for pandemics. And I think one of the lessons that was reinforced is that, and I'm sure most companies are the same, Mark, that those lessons, you have to learn to test those things out on a frequent basis. You've got to pay attention and amend those plans with experience. So we test DR, we test BCP, and these things have certain assumptions built in, right? One of the things is we expect that one of our offices in the New York area, for instance, would always be open, right? Now for COVID, we didn't actually have to close any office down permanently or even fully. So that was good. But I think those assumptions you need to test. And I think be a bit harsher on what those assumptions are, expect them to happen. Now in New York, we've had a lot of disasters, right? We've had hurricanes, we've had power outages, we've had COVID, of course. So we were tested quite a lot on these plans. But I would say one lesson is making sure you pay attention to the plans and take the lessons from your tests and roll them back into your planning and your infrastructure. So I think one thing that one lesson we learned, which is a positive lesson, this 5-week project I mentioned, where we digitized our mailroom, I think it's astonishing that when people are, that people can be robust and can deal with change quickly. If you explain the situation, if everyone understands the goal and what you're trying to achieve, you can do things very quickly. In Britain, people call this the Dunkirk spirit, right? Where everyone steps up and goes the extra mile. With COVID, we had that with lots and lots of people. So we're able to do things incredibly quickly. Now, you don't want to run all your projects that way, but it just shows that people are resilient and robust and can deal with change quickly. So those are the two things I think. To take your plans carefully. Yeah, go on, Mark.
Yeah, last question looking back, and then let's look forward into 2021. But the last question I'd have would be, knowing what you know now about 2020, what would you have done differently? You know,
I think, yeah. I think looking back, I think one of the prime areas was protecting people from being sick. So trying to stop people coming to the office completely. Now, I think stuff we're doing now, where we had people coming into our offices when a PC would stop, had to be rebooted. Simple things like just rebooting a PC. People were remoting into those desktops from home, and sometimes they would stop working, so we had to get people in to restart them. Nowadays, that's different. We're working away from that, but having people in the office just doing those things. Because New York was, if you remember, New York was pretty bad at the start, right? There was a lot of cases. So I think we'd have been a bit more aggressive on trying to avoid that even more, knowing what we know now. So I think that's one of the lessons. And again, it's taking these things extremely seriously. Luckily, very few people did get sick, but all the same, that's a lesson that we had to learn. I think just moving things out of your offices completely is a big lesson.
Got it. And now let's start looking forward. What's the transformation agenda for 2021? Where do you go from here? What's the 12, 18 month technology horizon for AST?
Well, I think we're investing a lot in our core platforms for our business. As I said to you before, we have we service customers in all stages of their life cycle, whether they're private. So in private, we have a system called Estrella, a company called Estrella, which helps, it's a software as a service business, helping private companies manage things like the cap tables, how private companies manage those things. So we'll keep building those things out, Mark. That's a growth business for us. We're very excited by it. Our proxy business, proxy voting business, we have a great set of tools there, which helps companies manage collecting the vote. We'll continue to invest in those things. Both of those systems, by the way, Estrella and proxy, are backed by blockchain. So we see blockchain as a key component in managing. We call it the genealogy of a share in Estrella, where you can see where private companies change through various rounds of funding. You know this, Mark. It gets very complicated as companies grow when they get different rounds of funding. So we use blockchain to help manage the life cycle and the history, the genealogy, as we call it, of a share. And Proxy IQ is the same. We store the votes in blockchain. So we'll invest in those things, provide great analytics for our clients as they manage those life cycle. Robotics, we'll continue to invest in robotics, just automating repetitive tasks that can be better done by a robot, leaving the individuals to handle proper difficult queries from our clients. And we're looking at APIs now. We're doing a lot of work with APIs for our third parties that we deal with, we work with, as well as internal system communications, and helping us build out new technologies. And then I mentioned the digitalization project. We'll continue automating document management. Documents aren't going away anytime soon. We're all into e-signatures these days, but there's still a lot of physical documents floating around, and we'll be moving those things away. So I think it's one of the things that we'll see in the year ahead, as well as also continuing, Mark, I think, this shift away from an office-based workforce into one that's a bit more hybrid. So we are almost all working from home right now, apart from a few people in our mailroom, and I see that continuing. So we'll continue to build out that capability. So having more people just logging into our virtual machines in our data centers. Those are the things we'll be investing in.
That's great. Let's spend a little more time on technology innovation. You're in an information services environment. Dozens of startups are nipping at your heels, trying to have point solutions, either in IPOs or proxy. they're all over the place, right? And we had this conversation previously. How do you keep that technology innovation edge? How's it structured? How do you prioritize those kinds of projects? Because you're, a very traditional business in many senses. You talked about, the mailroom and call center and customer support, but at the same time, these, Silicon Valley is funding startups that are in your space, and yet you remain, a market leader and successful. So how is that structured, and what are the processes behind that, and how do you stay ahead on the technology innovation front?
You're right. I think innovation is part of our lifeblood in AST. I mean, I mentioned Estrella, our private equity solution a second ago. Now we understand we can't build everything for everyone. So Estrella is a great example of a partnership model where we've built a lot of partners around the edge of Estrella, and so building partnerships to do services that we feel that they could do better, whether it's valuation services, whether it's other services. So we partner where we can and where we will. We're looking at all our traditional business is transfer agent. And of course, the US market's very robust. A lot of IPOs coming out there, a lot of companies turning public all the time, which is great. But of course, we've got to look to the future as well. So whether that's digital offerings from companies, how they move away from traditional equity. So we're looking at those things. We try and innovate as much as we can. Of course, there's only so much you can do every year. But as I mentioned, we're looking at APIs. We're looking at better tools for, as I mentioned, blockchain. So again, we invest a lot. We've educated all our executives in the last 6 months in agile methodologies. So Marty, you mentioned Marty, our CEO, our CFO, all our execs have been educated in agile. We're moving to an agile-based way of developing. So we're trying to do things in an agile way. So it's a whole company effort here. We feel that the best solutions are best made by cross-functional teams, the best answers. And we've seen that with many of our solutions. So again, we're trying to instill a culture, Mark, that helps everyone think they can get to the right idea. And those are the best solutions in my mind.
I want to touch on blockchain, and then we'll get to culture and people here next 10 minutes or so. On the blockchain side, highly regulated environment, massive, millions of transactions, I assume, per day. If you think about, the transfer business running on blockchain. Was that developed in-house? Did you bring in external folks to help you out on that? Has it scaled the way you've expected it to? There's all these scaling questions around blockchain. Obviously, being in a regulated environment that got signed off. I mean, there must be a mini case study.
Well, the blockchain technology, Mark, is used for our votes, for proxy voting. It's not used for our TA business. It's used for our voting. It's also used for, if you like, ownership interests in Estrella, the private equity cap tables. We wanted to make sure that the data was encrypted. We want to make sure the data is secure. It's immutable, as we described blockchain. So you can always go back in time and see where things were. One of the use cases for the private equity space, when they go through various rounds of funding, it can get very complicated to see where how things have evolved over the many years that company may be in private ownership. So the blockchain helps us see as we call it, the genealogy of the share. So to answer your question about how we developed it, it is our code. We've developed it using the IBM blockchain there. We've used partners for a lot of things. We used a partner to help us build this. But it's IP that's our IP, and it's unique to AST. And we're very proud of it. It works well. I think the use cases we have doesn't require tens of thousands of transactions per minute, right? So we're not seeing, it's not a retail cash business where you'll see high volumes, but we do protect the blockchain ahead of it by funneling it through a sort of pub sub mechanism, just to try and protect the blockchain from any peaks in the volume, and that's worked very well. We haven't seen any performance issues with the blockchain.
So it's a proxy voting application, but there's a roadmap or a blueprint to expand that as transaction volumes are supported, et cetera.
We're continuing to support it for the proxy business. We're using it for mutual funds right now. We'll move that into our TA business ultimately, and they'll all be written to our blockchain. So yeah, we like it very much, and also for the private equity space. It's proven to be a nice use case for our customers there.
That's great. Okay, let's loop back on the people and culture conversation. You know, we've been on conference calls. I've seen the whole management team sitting around the table. We spent time together in Copenhagen. How do you square that circle now inside of AST? How are you thinking about it? You haven't been face to face with your team for a long while. Are we using up a surplus of culture and connectivity with people, and you know that's on the decline? You know, there's a view out there that just says we're productive because we know these people, but over time maybe an atrophy sets in where, you know, we kind of lose that connectedness. How do you see 2021 playing out? And then the follow-up question will be around hybrid, remote, that kind of thing.
It is an issue, right? I mean, it's one thing when you've met all your colleagues in the office over the years. You've been out for dinner with them, you've grabbed coffees with them, all these things. Those are good. It's when the new folks start, or when maybe those relationships go stale. You need to make sure that you stay on top of it. And we also say we've got all of our staff pretty much working remotely now. Our call centers are remote, and they may continue to be remote forever. So how you build the camaraderie and the teamwork in a remote situation is different. I mean, clearly tools like what we're talking to now with Zoom. I think I've been on more video conferences in the last year than I've probably been in the rest of my life put together. And I think everyone's feeling the same thing. But how we manage remotely, how we gather that, how we make sure people are included, the camaraderie, those things are super important. I think the managers need to pay attention to this. I think we need to train our staff on how to include people, on how we can keep that relationships going. And I think educating our leaders is super important. I think, so that's one thing. I think the other thing that's a danger right now with us is that people work very long days. I think it's easier to just get sucked into you come into your office, your home office, and you are here for 12, 14 hours a day. It's very dangerous. We found last year that a lot of people didn't take vacations, didn't take all their vacation. That's unhealthy as well. So from a managerial point of view, Mark, there's a few things we have to be cognizant of, and making sure that people are talking to each other, are, you know, taking the time to, you know, just chat about things that are not work related, and also paying attention to people's work-life balance. Are they taking time away from their desk and remaining healthy? So it's not just the risk of catching COVID, it's the risk of immersing yourself too much into work, which is so easy to do. And I think we're all probably recognize that one.
It's called Spotlight. This is an unrehearsed question. I'll put you on the spot. Any specific techniques you use to onboard new employees, or any insights in that process, or how maybe you got better at it throughout 2020 as you onboarded new employees that didn't have that context, or that, you know, that background or that culture, and couldn't meet face to face?
Look, I don't think we have all the answers, but clearly we have these project-based, we employ hundreds of people, and our HR team do a phenomenal job there doing video conferencing and audio conferencing. Whereas previously people would come into the office for a sit down. Those are just not happening. So there's a bit more risk, I think, from both sides, employer and employee, knowing what you're getting into. And I just think that over communicating, Mark, is the only answer here. And I think the use of technologies such as audio and video has been a godsend, honestly, just to help in bridging those gaps. And I just think as we onboard people in technology as well, just making sure they're included. So we use Teams at AST, and that's been great. Just the collaboration, document sharing, chatting, it's been a wonderful help to help bridge some of those gaps.
Great. And let's wrap up. Let's have a conversation just to finish around hybrid, remote. Or have you started to segment, you know, the employee base to say these are true remote jobs, and, you know, live where you want in the time zone, or, you know, these are really more hybrid jobs, and later in 2021 we see this segment of the population, of the employee population, coming back 2 days, 3 days a week into, you know, Manhattan and Wall Street. How do you start thinking about hybrid versus remote versus, you know, there's people going to be 5 days a week back in the office as soon as it's safe? What's the thinking across AST in that regard?
Well, I think we're very open to these new ways of working. I mean, we've been doing this for a year now. We've had people all working from home, and I think the hybrid model will probably exist for the great majority of AST going forward. I think there are certain parts of our businesses that will always be in New York, our DFK business, the people who need to be talking to our capital markets customers, they will need to be physical, I think, for much of their time. For me, from an IT point of view, I think working remotely is a boon for many individuals that you save on the commute and all those things. But look, I think the days of large offices with wall-to-wall people isn't something coming back. I think for my liking, I would still like to have my team in the office. I don't know, maybe 1 day, 2 days a week, just so we can, catch up over coffee, just get things done. I think that's important too, because I don't think we talk about video conferencing, we talk about audio conferencing, but I think face-to-face, for me personally, we need some of that. But I think a lot of our business, we will have people remote, and we will have them all around the country working for us. We have relationship managers right now all over the country. We have call center folks all over the country. So we're doing that now. But so I think we'll be a hybrid. I just don't think I don't think we're going back to the day where every single person had to be in the office every single day. I think we've proven over the last year that it can work, and it works well for individuals and for employers. I just think we need to be comfortable that we are making time with people to get to know them and get the culture going. So I think some in-office space for people, I think for me is essential going forward, but it won't be for everybody.
A lot of people, remember the days of offsites, and an offsite was a certain set of people on a certain day go to a certain location to talk about a certain agenda. Those are offsites, right? We're seeing a pattern where companies are now talking about on-sites, where a certain number of people on a certain day come to a certain location and talk about a certain topic. And I think the trick there is it's almost an operations research one, is how do you optimally organize that so everyone doesn't end up in the office 5 days a week, right? But if you can be surgical about that, I think there's huge benefits to be had designing on-sites instead of off-sites.
I think the common feature there, Mark, is just people getting together away from the norm, right? And right. I think that's a common feature.
Right. Alan, this has been just absolutely wonderful. Thanks for the insights today. We said we'd keep it to 30 minutes. This is a regular dialogue we'll be having every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 6 p.m. CET. Just a couple quick 30 seconds to wrap up here. CIONET's recently expanded in the US and Canada. If you're a North American digital leader and you want to get plugged into our digital community, there's 3 ways to do it. We have a membership app with over 10,000 digital leaders. It's complimentary and qualified. It's for qualified digital leaders. Please find that on our CIONET website. We're also actively expanding our advisory board in the US and Canada. So if you feel you'd like to learn more about that, or you want to nominate somebody, also please contact us. And thirdly, this Spotlight program every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 6 p.m. CET will be an avenue to profile other digital leaders across sectors, across geographies, and different digital leader titles, CTOs, CDOs, CPOs, CIOs, of course. Next up, Wednesday, the 3rd of February, delighted to have Rui Pedro Silva join us. He's Chief Product Officer at Maersk, the multi-billion-dollar logistics and supply chain multinational, 80,000 employees in 120 markets globally, and he's CPO there. So we'll have a really interesting conversation about how he thinks about products in this line, in his lineup. On deck throughout February and March, we have a number of other digital leaders that have already confirmed to be spotlighted, including Coca-Cola, Bank of America, City of Atlanta, Bank of the West, Knoll, Campbell Soup, and others. So thanks again for all your time, and appreciate you listening in, and we'll see you next Wednesday at noon Eastern, 6 p.m. CET.
For the last 15 years, I've been on a quest to discover the DNA of the most successful digital leaders in the world. What makes them tick, what's in their minds and in their hearts. We are sharing deep insights from our world-class CIOs so that you get inspired, can learn and reach your full potential as a digital leader. If you are an ambitious technology executive, then I invite you to join CIONET. Join our community so that you too can realize your ambition.